Hi, I'm Karun Chandhok, a former F1 driver and now a commentator and presenter with Sky Sports F1, and this is my Reddit Ask Me Anything. So the first question is, what is the most complicated thing you've needed to cover as a journalist and why? I would have to say the 2021 F1 season. It was such a roller coaster, and really trying to look at, for example, the big moments, the accident at Silverstone, and then obviously the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix that year, arguably the most controversial race we've had in recent F1 history. It was such a difficult race to try and break down, and you know, even today there are people who are still upset and emotional when we talk about that race. So yeah, it was clearly a weekend and a season where there was so much pressure from the paddock, and you had all these people from within the Red Bull and the Mercedes camps telling you things, trying to sort of get you to sway your opinion. So yeah, on the whole, I think that was the hardest thing to cover. What type of presentation upgrades do you wish you could bring to the fans during the broadcast? I think on the whole, actually, the actual race coverage, you know, from when the lights out till the checkered flag, I think is really good at the moment. The graphics are really good. I think the way that we got some team radio to tell the narrative, and the way that F1 show the pictures, I think is brilliant actually. The helicopter shots we got in Baku, for example, were sensational in the cities. What I'd like to see more before and after is just a bit more access in the garages. I'd like to hear from the engineers a bit more. You know, I'd like to be able to have a microphone on GP or Bono, you know, people like that, and just see what they're talking about with the drivers in the debriefs, or you know, just a bit more behind the scenes, maybe even in the garages while the race is unfolding. If we can get a bit more sort of behind the scenes with them, I think that'd be cool. If I could add just one Mario Kart item to F1, what do I think could make the racing most interesting? How about some jumps? I don't know, you could leap over the car in front. That could be funny, couldn't it? Probably crash when you land, but we'll see. What, in your opinion, is the best looking car of all time? My favorite has got to be the 1990 Ferrari 641, driven by Alain Prost and Nigel Mansell that year. I just think, you know, the lines on that car, absolutely stunning. I'd say in terms of livery, the Marlboro McLarens from the early 90s as well, the 1991 car, as well as the Williams FW14B and the 7-Up Jordan, the 91. So on the whole, I would say between 1990 and 1991 is probably the best looking era of F1 that I think. What are your thoughts on the anti-swearing comments made by the FIA? I think it's a bit of a storm in a teacup, to be honest. Yes, you know, I get it. The drivers are ambassadors for the sport, and you know, you don't want them swearing, you know, and putting off young kids particularly. But equally, they're athletes. There's adrenaline pumping, and you know, penalizing them for speaking out when they're emotional just feels a little bit harsh. I think we want to see characters. We don't want to see robots. We want to see them wear their heart in their sleeves. And also, we have to recognize a lot of them, English is their second language. So, you know, let's say we get an Indian driver there, or we get a driver from Japan or China. I mean, what are we going to do? Have translators for every language sitting there monitoring every word they've said? It sounds like a fight that you know, I'm not sure is worth fighting. What do you regret not doing in your racing career? Did an opportunity ever cross your path that you wish you had taken? I wish I had done more racing in North America, actually. Championships like the IMSA Endurance Championship out there, sports car racing out there, looks absolutely brilliant fun. They've got some fantastic racetracks in North America, and I'd love to have raced on more of those. And also Bathurst, it looks like a really fun race to have done, the V8 supercar race there at Bathurst. So yeah, that would have been nice to do. But I guess the biggest one has got to be the Macau Grand Prix, because as a kid growing up in India, actually the Macau Grand Prix was broadcast even before F1. So that's the first ever race I watched live, was the 1991 Macau Grand Prix, won by David Coulthard. And I got to do a support race, but never the Formula 3 Macau Grand Prix. I get to change one F1 rule regulation to whatever I want. What am I changing, updating? I'm going to cheat and pick two. One being a low-hanging fruit, which was I'd like to see 2 pit stop races as the minimum everywhere. And that is a really simple one line in the regulation, which is the teams have to use all 3 types of tyre at some stage of the race, which means every race will be a 2-stopper. It's really simple. I've been saying it for about a decade, and I don't know why it's not happened, because it would just make the races more interesting. Bigger picture, personally, I'm no longer a fan of the hybrid engines that we have in F1. I think it was good when they came in 2014 to show, how F1 was at the forefront. But now the road car industry is really doing a lot in terms of electrification and hybrids, and the way the homologation cycles work with F1. I think in some ways we're behind the road car industry. So I personally would like to see F1 be at the forefront of sustainable fuels, go back to normally aspirated engines, just pure internal combustion engines, but running on 100% sustainable fuels to try and drive the innovation on sustainable fuels, and come up with big screaming V10s again. Let's have 20,000 RPM V10s and bring the noise back to the sport. What should India do to produce F1 level quality drivers? I think we need more grassroots motorsport. I've been out there last week actually, where we opened India's first CIK level go-karting track. It's the first one in the country. We were very lucky. Mika Hakkinen came out there to open the track, and there's already a lot of, just in the last month, there's so much enthusiasm around karting kids in that community. So that's what we need. We need more grassroots infrastructure and manufacturers backing, motorsport out at that domestic level to help kids to start their career in India, so they don't have to go far off to find their first steps. Do I think Daniel Ricciardo was disrespected by Red Bull by not officially confirming his announcement before the Singapore GP, so he could have had a proper goodbye? I think Lawson deserves a seat, but it irks me how they didn't give Daniel a proper send-off. I think that's a pretty common sentiment, and it all just felt a bit strange. I can only assume there were some contractual reasons as to why that played out the way it was. Daniel, I felt for him that Singapore weekend, because it seemed like from the Thursday he knew he was out after Singapore. He knew that was his last weekend, but he had to go through this whole weekend of this sort of charade of, saying, I don't know, we'll see what happens, blah, 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 and if it might be my last, it felt all a bit awkward for him. It felt awkward for the people watching. And in a way, I feel for Liam as well, because he's coming in to replace, arguably one of the most popular drivers F1's had in the last decade, who hasn't had a chance to do a proper send-off. So it just felt a bit awkward for everybody involved. What's the most important thing you take when you're traveling? Oh, that's a good question. Probably my earphones. So yeah, I can listen to my podcasts and talk to the kids at home when I'm FaceTiming and not have to disturb everyone around. And snack bars, because you always get hungry when you're doing long haul flights. If I had to pick one European track to drop to replace with the new one elsewhere, which would you drop and which would you add? I think I would actually drop Imola. It's a fantastic venue to go to, obviously historic, and I think in qualifying it's a very exciting track to watch qualifying and for the drivers, but it's too narrow for the racing nowadays with the size of the cars we've got. I think F1 has kind of outgrown it. We're not seeing much overtaking there. Which one would I replace it with? I feel like we need a German Grand Prix back on the track. It feels really strange to have an F1 calendar without a German Grand Prix and without a French Grand Prix. But I think in particular, there's obviously with Mercedes there, and we have such a lot of German influence in the sport over the time with Vettel and Schumacher and all that sort of stuff. And it feels a bit odd not to have a German Grand Prix. How do drivers in F1 prepare themselves mentally when they know the car is a backmarker, they qualified in the bottom 5, knowing that the race is just going to end with them being out of the points at best? Well, that was basically my time in F1. It's tough. I always say in F1 you're racing against your circumstances. So, I think you use your teammate as a reference, and that really is the guide. And, when I was with HRT, for example, we had 3 other new teams on the grid at the time. Well, one of them dropped out, so 2 other new teams. And it was very much a race about trying to beat some of them. And, I remember places like Monaco or Canada and Valencia where I got ahead of, some of those other cars, which we knew were better cars than ours. We were most definitely in the slowest car. And that felt good, and you felt like you'd done a good job. And it's very much about earning some credibility as a driver who deserves a seat in F1. Favorite F1 corner to watch cars from? It's easy, Beckett's at Silverstone. Brilliant high-speed section, such an awesome place to watch cars, and totally recommend to anyone who goes to the British Grand Prix. What is the most underrated form of motorsports you have competed in? I once went and did some grass track motorsport. It was like an autocross event in a field. It was in a farmer's field, and I drove in like a buggy over there, and it was so much fun. It was pouring with rain, and you're just sort of sliding around in the mud in this farmer's field, and it was absolutely brilliant fun. So yeah, I would totally recommend it. It was in a cross car actually that I was driving, and I would totally recommend it to anyone who gets a chance to do it. Is there any upcoming Indian talent to watch out for the motor racing world? Well, we have Kush Maini in Formula 2. You know, I think he's done a very good job this year in the F2 championship. He's likely to do another season, but he's also a reserve driver, or a test driver, I should say, with Alpine, and has done a good job in the F1 tests. So yeah, fingers crossed that he gets to make that last step into F1. Thank you very much for sending in your questions. And remember, you can watch all of the rest of the F1 season, which should be an exciting end coming up on Sky Sports F1.